This was Yi Chang's third month in Black Cove, and his task of the day was to mine for black gold ore. The ore was one Black Cove speciality commonly found scattered in orbits around the planet. It was indeed a tedious job to mine the valuable ore. The mining ships could not enter the asteroid belt, so mechs were utilized instead. It was impossible to perform scans of the asteroid belts. Hence, holographic images were taken and inspected with the naked eye in search of ore deposits. The process of mining the ore was also akin to a mixed training regimen that tested one's piloting skills and eyesight. To make matters worse, the procedure of transporting the ore back was also a challenging task. The yield of the black gold ore was extremely low. It was primarily used to manufacture the black masks worn by Yi Chang and the rest. Yi Chang's mech, the F-58, was similar to the others in Black Cove. They were all black humanoid mechs. However, due to Yi Chang's deft hands, his mech was modified to include a few extra features which kept it at par with his skills. In truth, Yi Chang had improved tremendously in these past few months. More importantly, he began to understand the concept of battle strategies instead of relying solely on his instincts and experiences as he did before. He also thought that Mew's foundation training for him was not as ridiculous as Hack said, but was surprisingly quite useful to him. Yi Chang was not very skilled in the ancient martial arts, and he was not particularly interested in them either. For instance, Yi Chang did not find that the breathing technique taught by Hack was effective. As for foundation and steel sphere training taught by Mew, he finally surpassed the 10th level of steel spheres that he was struggling with for a long time after sacrificing blood and tears. The silver liquid's effect was truly remarkable, and it sure did give him satisfaction. Yi Chang had seen Hack in action. Although he had the strength of a bull, Yi Chang still felt a hint of disappointment. If Hack and Mew were to fight against each other in a combat, Yi Chang was quite confident that Mew will take him down effortlessly with just a stab. Oh dear Mew, when will you wake up? I miss you so much, Yi Chang thought to himself. His vision darkened and Yi Chang shifted his focus back to reality only to realize that his mech was approaching towards a very large rock. Yi Chang was startled and immediately maneuvered his mech out of its way just in time to avoid collision. The presence of the rock indicated that the black gold ores were depleting around that particular area. Thus, he would have to travel further into the asteroid belt in order to get his hands on the ore. Yi Chang drove his mech deeper into the recesses of the asteroid belt. He flew deeper inside and yet could not manage to find any black gold ore along the way. It seemed that he was out of luck today. Yi Chang was dispirited. However, as he decided to make a turn back, a huge black gold ore of around 2 meters in diameter came into view, and it was heading further away from him at a high speed. Yi Chang gained confidence and pulled himself together. Without further hesitation, he accelerated his mech and went after the giant black gold ore. All of a sudden, his mech rocked violently and Yi Chang felt as though he lost control of it and being pulled in by a strong attractive force. The mech was flying all by itself. Yi Chang immediately sensed something amiss. He quickly reversed the engines and steered backwards in hopes of escaping the pulling force. Even though he had increased the engine's capacity to its maximum, his mech was still being pulled forward. When Yi Chang looked ahead, he was dumbstruck. The debris around him were pulled towards the same direction as his mech by an external force. Yi Chang then noticed that the debris were forming a whirlpool pattern, and he became aware of what he was about to face. An asteroid whirlpool. This must be an asteroid whirlpool. This was Elma Zone's most terrifying feature. Due to its existence, not many dared to venture into the depths of the zone. No way. How can I be so out of luck? Yi Chang wailed mentally. Yi Chang tried desperately to escape from the grasp of the asteroid whirlpool, but no matter what he did, it was of no use. As the asteroid whirlpool grew larger, it became more visible. Yi Chang realized how massive the asteroid whirlpool was and realized that he was just a speck of dust compared to it. Yi Chang felt very helpless. At that moment, he thought that his fate was about to be ripped to shreds. Who would have thought that after rebelling against his destiny for so many years, his death was determined by an asteroid whirlpool? Yi Chang drowned in his sad thoughts. Idiot. What are you fantasizing about? Are you looking forward to your death? A voice suddenly played in his mind. Yi Chang startled and felt an instant joy. Mew, is that you? All right, there's no time for talking. Now direct the mech 9 degrees away from the radius vector and make small bidirectional angle adjustments along the way. His assumption wasn't wrong. It was Mew. This was a voice Yi Chang would never forget in his life. Yi Chang suppressed his overjoyed emotions and quickly moved his hands over the controls. He did not have any doubts on Mew's instructions. If there was someone whom Yi Chang trusted with his life, it would definitely be Mew. Yi Chang's hands manipulated the controls at lightning speed. His breakthrough with the 10 steel spheres in his training had paid off in this situation. Yi Chang's shadow-like hands were no longer just skin and bones, but they were as solid as rocks. Yi Chang's F-58 suddenly changed its direction and started to shake vigorously and laterally at small angles. The F-48 was like a black fish desperately struggling to escape from a fishing net, struggling non-stop. Like a miracle, the F-58 began to pull away from the asteroid whirlpool. Yi Chang gave a sigh of relief. Now switch to 8 degrees from the radius vector and repeat the motion. Miu's voice rang again. Yi Chang panted heavily. All the hustle and bustle to save the ship from being sucked into the asteroid whirlpool had drained most of his energy, but it was all worth it. Looks like you have improved tremendously. Miu commented lightly. Yi Chang was still absorbed in the joy of escaping death and reuniting with Miu. Yeah, I've been training at Black Cove and learned quite a few things. Black Cove. Miu's tone sounded off. And so, Yi Chang began his story from when he first awakened. Miu listened intently while occasionally interjecting a few questions. When Yi Chang finished, Miu went quiet. Is there a problem? Yi Chang asked curiously. Miu kept silent for a few moments before answering. That Black Cove that you mentioned might be a problem. A problem? Yi Chang was baffled. Miu did not answer him directly, but instead he asked, did they give you this mech? Yi Chang nodded. Yeah, this mech has an amazing performance and it can even withstand the deadly asteroid whirlpool. I'm impressed. Remove the 7th photon circuit board from under the controls in the mech and check it carefully. Miu's voice was still calm as ever. Yi Chang took out the 7th photon circuit board as instructed and began inspecting. He believed Miu had his reasons for him to do it. As expected, something was not right. There seemed to be a return circuit that was capable of signaling. By logic, there should not be a return circuit in this part of the circuit board. Yi Chang might not be well educated in worldly matters, but he was not dim. On the contrary, he was very bright and he could deal with situations like these with a breeze. Without hesitation, Yi Chang used some tools to remove that photon return circuit, for he was not keen on being spied upon. Don't worry. It's just this one spot. I have checked the rest for you. Miu spoke leisurely. Yi Chang only acknowledged with an "oh." Yi Chang was not particularly angry about it since he had learned much from them and there was no free lunch in this world. However, the food at their canteen was not that bad, Yi Chang thought yearningly and licked his lips. You said you were soaked in some kind of silver liquid. You're not saying that's a problem too, right? Yi Chang said with hesitation. The possibility is very high. Miu did not care for Yi Chang's feelings and spoke plainly. That damned Black Cove. Yi Chang was about to give a furious glare in the direction of Black Cove to express his anger when he suddenly panicked. Miu, I think we're lost. I realized earlier on, Miu replied lazily. What do we do? Based on my experience, anything that happens around you can be said to be incalculable events, Miu declared decisively. Miu, do you think we're heading in the right direction? Yi Chang asked in desperation of having a conversation with Miu as though he hadn't spoken to him for days. The probability of escaping is the same no matter which direction we opt to go for, Miu replied calmly. But Miu, why do you need so much black gold ore? Yi Chang asked curiously. That information is classified. I am not in place to say anything regarding this matter, Miu answered with full of mystery. Miu added that black gold ore was an extremely rare mineral. The black gold derived from the ore, which was scientifically named close, had not only outstanding physical characteristics but also self-restoration capabilities. The latter was the mineral's most valuable quality. Who would have thought that the black gold ore that he found along the way was more than he had ever mined before altogether? Miu kept all the black gold ore in his alternate dimension. No matter how large the ore was, Miu only needed to raise his hands and the ore would vanish into thin air. Yi Chang was very impressed by his talent. It was a pity when Miu told him that that was an exclusive trick of his which was never taught to others. Yi Chang was discouraged and twitched his mouth. Suddenly, he realized something he had never thought of before. I heard that there were many skillful mech engineers and mechanics on Black Cove. I should have asked them if they could restore you. How could I have forgotten that? Yi Chang hit his head lightly with disappointment. In front of Miu, Yi Chang acted like a complete different person. The mech you are piloting now is one of their products. Miu asked. Yeah, this mech is not so bad after all. Yi Chang replied. Then they would never be able to restore me, Miu said with confidence. The arrogance in his tone made Yi Chang gave him a sidelong glance. Fortunately, Yi Chang had the habit of having backup energy cells with him. No matter how durable the F-58 can be, its would have been depleted if not for those backup cells. Yi Chong had the high-energy organic liquid food stored as emergency ration on the mech as he yearned for the delicacies at the canteen in Black Cove. This further increased his suffering. Mew was still in the alternate dimension to minimize energy usage. Black Cove mechs were very advanced. Yi Chong's F-58, for example, was only a training mech, but all of its parts and accessories were far more advanced than all the high-tech mechs Yi Chong had ever piloted before. The overall performance was also a level above the rest. As for the engine, the design for this model was different from that of the more popular engine structures in the market. Yi Chong had once dissected the F-58 himself for inspection. Whether it was in terms of the engine power or continuous flight time, the F-58's engine outperformed the so-called superb engines in the market by a wide margin. Of course, compared to Mew's sophisticated engine structure, it was still child's play. Yi Chong still had not managed to decipher Mew's engine schematics diagram. Yi Chong and Mew found another half-a-meter-wide black gold ore. Yi Chong summoned Mew from the alternate dimension and Mew immediately approached the black gold ore. Suddenly, Yi Chong sensed something amiss and spoke to Mew with full of uncertainty. "Mew, look. The asteroids here are a lot fewer." Mew replied lazily, "To be precise, the unit space density of asteroids here is 62% less than it was 10 hours ago. However, this percentage has a certain random factor and is only used as a reference." Yi Chong was excited. "It looks like we're flying in the right direction." Mew poured cold water onto his enthusiasm as usual. "Don't get happy too soon. If we manage to leave the asteroid belt, then what? Who knows where we are? Are there planets nearby? How far away are they from us? Is it inhabited? If there are no starships?" Mew paused abruptly and his tone took an anxious turn. "Quick. Steer 15 degrees from the radius vector and fly straight ahead. Maximum speed." Mew swiftly kept the black gold ore into the alternate dimension and returned himself there. Upon hearing his words, Yi Chong knew there must be new changes in their situation. He stopped conserving energy as before and accelerated the mech to its maximum velocity. After spending some time in the asteroid belt, Yi Chong was now quite skillful in avoiding the asteroids. Although the speed was now maximized, Yi Chong still managed to easily and adroitly evade the rocks in front of him. Mew was surprised by his ability. "Yi, your skills are great." Yi Chong may seem to be at ease after hearing those words, but he was entirely focused on flying the mech, so he did not reply Mew. His eyes were plastered to the holographic screen, fearing for any mishaps. At this speed, no matter how solid the F-58's armor was, his mech would not survive an impact with an asteroid. Yi Chong sure did not want to take this situation lightly. The ores which were visible in sight became lesser with time and Yi Chong felt more relieved. Yi Chong also knew that he had finally reached the edge of the asteroid belt and was greatly encouraged by that fact. As expected, after a light beep sounded, Yi Chong's scanning systems returned to normal and began to scan the surroundings automatically. Black Cove produced excellent products. The F-58's detection system, one that Yi Chong had never used before, was actually quite modern. It immediately detected something abnormal ahead and a red spot on the holographic screen began to enlarge. As the holographic image became larger, it also became clearer to view. "It's a starship." Yi Chong was overjoyed and revved the engines to approach the ship. 3 minutes later, the other party was still not aware of his presence. Yi Chong was intrigued. While the F-58 could detect its target at such a far distance due to its advanced detection system, how could the other party not manage to notice him now that he meters away from the starship? Could it be that the F-58 also had an excellent anti-detection system? Yi Chong immediately searched through the information in the photon processor of the F-58. As he had in mind, the F-58's armor had a special absorptive material mixed into it, and the material was capable of absorbing a wide spectrum of waves, resulting in the mech's exceptional anti-detection performance. This material also gave the mech its black color. Black Cove was a formidable force, but what were they aiming for? This thought flashed through Yi Chong's mind. "What does have to do with me? It's not like I'm going back." Yi Chong thought conceitedly. "Should we carry out a surprise attack on them?" Yi Chong inquired Mew for his opinion. The method, as expected, suited his usual habit and style. "A surprise attack. If the starship is damaged, then you'll be finished." Mew obviously disagreed. "This seems to be an average civilian ship. You can signal them first." "Okay." Yi Chong did not have a better idea. From his past experiences, he knew that an external damage on the starship would be devastating. If it wasn't for One Eye's well-equipped ship, he might not have survived. The other party did not seem nervous upon receiving his signal. Instead, they replied repeatedly that they were medical volunteers. Medical volunteers. What are those? Yi Chang asked with full of curiosity. Mew explained, medical volunteers are people who have expertise in medical skills or nursing. They offer free medical treatment for all, charging no fees, and they usually lead more difficult lives. Their principle is that life trumps all. Since they believe that all lives are equal, even if pirates are injured, they would also offer treatments. Hence, they are respected by almost everyone and no pirate would rob the medical volunteers. On the contrary, when the volunteers were in their hunting zone, the pirates would send escorts to protect them. They are mostly amiable and kind in nature besides being incredibly sympathetic. I believe that if you were to ask for a ride on their ship, they will not reject you. Mew suggested. Amiable. Yi Chang thought of all the mutants he was familiar with on the trash planet and could not even remember any of them being what Mew described as amiable. It was truly confounding. Since Mew had said so, he wouldn't be wrong. Yi Chang thought to himself. Yi Chang agreed to his suggestion and signaled a request to board the ship. Vela watched the mech that was slowly closing in on the starship. Vela was greatly surprised when he received a message from the other party as he did not notice their presence earlier. Shocked, Vela began to adjust the holographic display and finally found the other party's location after much effort. Vela was in his 40s. His short, bushy mustache made him look like a macho man. Vela was secretly impressed. The other party had obviously entered their warning zone. However, their ship's warning system did not sound an alarm. This implied that the other party's anti-detection system was far more sophisticated compared to the warning system of this ship. Once he received the signal that requested for boarding, Vela rest assured that the other party harbored no ill will. He was very much relieved. An invisible enemy was not someone anybody would like to encounter. After receiving the green light from old Mr. Wang, Vela accepted the request. As the mech neared, Vela finally saw what the other party really looked like, his expression twisted and his heart raced. Vela was adventurous during his youth and had established a small reputation amongst the like-minded. He had also spent some time at Black Cove for a certain period of time. He would never forget the appearance of this mech, it was a symbol of incomparable strength and cruelty. He had seen many whom disregarded the prohibition of violence at Black Cove killed on the spot, although there were quite a number of them who were stronger than him. For countless years, he had never seen anyone from Black Cove leave the place. Vela was intrigued, but he wasn't planning on treating his life as a joke. As such, he brushed away his curiosity quickly. Beside him, Wang Wiki curled her lips in distaste. That mech looks hideous. Wang Wiki was tall and her exquisite face was complemented with a charming smile. Her soft, shiny long hair was braided, giving her a clean look. Her large, glistening eyes blinked as though they could speak and were a fatal charm for most men. The F-58 was around 10 meters long and was thoroughly black in color, making it look unremarkable. Since it was a training mech, it was not armed with excessive weapons and was only equipped with a UF magnetic sword as per Yi Chang's request and 2 redesigned parrying lance. For safety in the asteroid belt, the F-58 also carried a big alloy shield of over 5 meters long on its back. The slightly arched shield resulted in the comical look of the F-58, looking like it was carrying a shell. However, the sharp edges of the shield clearly indicated that the shield was not only for defense purposes. What caught most of Vela's attention were the 2 curved blades at the elbow joints of the mech. They normally lay flat on the upper arms, but by bending at the joints, the sharp tip of the blades and the terrifying edges would show their vile selves. Wan Ziking, who was also with them, nodded in agreement. Of course he's not as beautiful as Kyr's phantasm, TSK, that look is surely awful. Wang Wiki was old Mr. Wang's granddaughter whom had passed the exams for intermediate level of mech piloting at a very young age. The main reason of tagging along with her grandfather on this trip is because she was worried of his safety. Besides, she would also get the opportunity to widen her knowledge in preparation for the expert level of mech piloting exams. Wan Ziking was Wang Wiki's senior. He began making his move on her at school, and now he was here with her. In all honesty, Wan Ziking was a fine-looking man. However, Wang Wiki was indifferent and being neither friendly nor aloof with him, and that drove him crazy. Vela smiled wryly, hoping that the pair of naive youngsters would not meddle with the Jinx newcomer. Vela was uncomfortable with the thought and could not help but speak up to the two, "You two better not meddle with that person. He's not someone you can afford to mess with." When he saw that they were not taking him seriously, he raised his voice and spoke firmly, "Kyr, Ziking, you hear me?" Wang Wiki stuck her tongue out a little and made a silly face at Wan Ziking. Uncle Vela had always took care of them and the two could only give him an obedient look. Vela rushed out of the bridge and welcomed the mysterious guest. Black mask and black windbreaker. Exactly as I imagined. Vela thought to himself. The black mask with a peculiar glimmer had a soft quality to it, and the silver irises were intimidatingly chilling. The strong visual contrast between black and white captured the attention of everyone around, such that they did not notice the little insignia on the mask's edge that marked F-58. Of course, Vela was an exception, for he had seen the black masks before. The loose windbreaker wrapped Yi Chong entirely, adding to his mysteriousness of the medical volunteers. Wang Wiki thought to herself, it would be so cool to have a mask like that. Definitely eye-catching. Yi Chong was always particularly respectful towards the elders, since they reminded him of his deceased papa and the Aurora's elders who treated him well. Yi Chong's actions were surprising to Vela. He did not think that a cold-blooded guard from the Black Cove would be so courteous to the elderly. Perhaps they weren't as heartless as they all thought they were. Vela finally began to feel assured. He was just in time for lunch and Yi Chong was invited to join them. Yi Chong ate heartily at the dining table, ignoring the stares of others at him. After his 7th bowl of food, Yi Chong rubbed his almost full stomach and thought contentedly, while this is still far from the delicacies at Black Cove, it's still much better than the F-58's high-energy organic liquid food. After greeting the people around him, Yi Chong returned to the room Vela prepared for him under their astonished gazes. Exercising to assist in his digestion was Yi Chong's habit. He began with a full-body routine. Yi Chong did a little warm-up, then moved and ran across the room. Running might not be an accurate term. Yi Chong moved with the tips of his feet, his toes touched the ground and his body flew forward in response. However, the room was too small and Yi Chong had to keep changing directions. He ended up circling around the room instead. Yi Chong increased his speed. His tiptoed landings on the ground began to produce muffled sounds. Now, the rhythm grew faster and the sound became louder. After 10 minutes, Yi Chong finally stopped. Beads of sweat marked his forehead and his breathing became heavier. Yi Chong shook his dizzy head forcefully. Mew was a little surprised. Yi, you've improved? Yi Chong laughed cheekily in response as he took out the steel spheres from the waist pocket in his windbreaker and placed them on the ground. He took a deep breath and placed his hands above the spheres, barely touching them. Yi Chong felt clear-headed enough and exhaled slowly before his hands began to move. Yi Chong gathered his attention and focused, banishing all distractions. A shadow shrouded over the steep spheres and the spheres began to collide with each other violently. They moved really fast and their trajectories after impact were difficult to predict. However, they always bounced back from the edges of the shadow region. The steel spheres moved faster and the shadow continued to spread. The crisp sounds from the colliding steel spheres within the shadow were almost continuously ringing. Yi Chong was about to put more strength onto his hands when he was suddenly alerted, which broke his concentration. He shouted, "Who's that?" as he swippeted the steel spheres back into his hands. He rolled backwards on instinct and shot 3 steel spheres. The thumb-sized steel sphere shrieked terrifyingly. 2 steel spheres embedded themselves in the door with 2 bangs reaching 10 centimeters deep into the CN Duraplast material, 2 centimeters away from penetrating the door. Another steel sphere went through the gap of the doorway and hit the opposite wall of the walkway, which was also deeply embedded within. Wang Wiki's face became pale and went as white as a sheet. The steel sphere that went through the door had missed the tip of her nose by less than a centimeter. The strong airstream that went with the sphere made her felt a hint of pain at her nose. If she had a mirror, she would have noticed a small cut on her nose tip due to the piercing airflow. A drop of blood started streaming down the top of her nose. She had never felt so close to death before. The steel sphere was fast enough to burrow deep into the wall. If it had hit my body, I would have, as she thought of it, terror enveloped her soul at an instant. Wang Wiki screamed in and ran away as fast as she could with her hands covering her face. She had only one wish then, and that was to get out of the haunted room. Yi Chong was ready to strike the steel balls again when he heard a piercing scream followed by loud thumps of footsteps slowly fading away. Mew popped out in Yi Chong's thoughts. "Yi, how could you be so uncouth towards a girl?" Yi Chong asked naively, "What do you mean?" Mew spoke as though he expected such a reaction from him. In this world, outside of trash planets, women are thought to be deserving of tenderness and care. Hence, most would hesitate to start a fight against women. Some had never even placed a finger on them. Yi Chong was curious, why? Just because they're women? Mew gave it a thought and agreed, it appears to be the case. Yi Chong disapproved. What a strange logic. But the strangest thing is that you, Mew, had proposed such strange logic. Mew kept silent as though he was choked. Yi Chong was pleased with himself. My skill was not bad, right? Mew was unimpressed. The attack was too weak. It wasn't enough to penetrate through the door. If it had, then it would be a threat to the enemy. Besides, you stood up too slowly and judged your strength inaccurately. If you had fired 2 more spheres immediately after the first 2, then they would have gone through the door and the girl would have been heavily injured if not dead. Yi Chong nodded in agreement. Right, I could have also. The two began a heated discussion. It was when they thought mealtime was approaching, they ended the interesting conversation. Yi Chong got up, put on his windbreaker and headed out. As he entered the main hall, it was indeed almost mealtime. This was something Yi Chong always looked forward to, and another would be the topic of the conversation he had earlier with Mew. Yi Chong was about to head towards the dining table when all of a sudden, Wan Ziking, who was holding a cup of boiling hot sweetgrass drink, approached in his direction. He was about to bump into Yi Chong, but Yi Chong took a step to the side to avoid the collision. A trace of slyness flashed in Wan Ziking's eyes as he pretended to exclaim in surprise and lost hold of the cup. The boiling hot sweetgrass drink splashed onto Yi Chong. Yi Chong gave Wan Ziking a death stare. The opponent's hostility was apparent, but what confused Yi Chong the most was the reason behind him resorting to such a harmless approach. Even if the sweetgrass drink splashed onto him, it would not hurt him. Could it be that there was some corrosive poison in the drink? Although Yi Chong could not comprehend his act, he was certain of the other party's hostility, and so, Yi Chong did not hesitate to take his next move. He stepped lightly on tiptoe and moved like a ghost to Wan Ziking's other side. His right hand struck like lightning and grasped Wan Ziking in the throat tightly, ready to finish him off. Yi Chong was certain that he could even break a steel beam as thick as his throat. Yi Chong pushed the thought of strangling him away. Instead, he pushed Wan Ziking hard as he simultaneously jumped backwards with the tip of his toes. Wan Ziking felt regretful. Even though he survived that fight, he knew well that no one would be left alive with that much force on the throat. Wan Ziking held his throat and kneeled at a corner, coughing vigorously with petrified eyes. Yi Chong's strength was such that even though he had opted for a push instead of a chokehold, Wan Ziking still bled a little from his mouth even though his throat survived the attack. The man was obviously hurt. Vela had his eyes on Yi Chong the moment he left his room. He understood why Wan Ziking did his little trick, although he cursed inwardly. Why didn't you carry out a background check on that man before attempting such a ridiculous trick? If he is one that prioritizes his physical appearance, he wouldn't retaliate. But the man you planned an attack on, he had skills of a professional killer. Are you plotting your own death? Out of desperation, Vela unholstered his heat ray guns from his thighs and shot between the two men. Vela did not intend to aim his shot at Yi Chong. He only wanted Yi Chong to back off and cool down the situation. Wang Wiki was reminded of the scene of her horrible experience earlier and screamed in fear. Wang Wiki's sharp scream gathered everyone's attention. As they noticed her terrified expression, they followed her gaze and saw Yi Chong standing proudly in a corner of the dining hall with Wan Ziking kneeling in fear and Vela standing at a distance with his gun in hand as though he was facing an enemy. The crowd exploded in mayhem. Vela groaned and hoped that the enemy would not release his anger on him next. Else, his life would probably end today. Yi Chong did not take the heat ray gun in Vela's hand seriously. His windbreaker could withstand a shot from any shooting weapon of grades 10K and below. The Black Cove's manufacturing workmanship was truly astounding. Yi Chong made a move. Old Mr. Wang sensed the precarious situation and stepped forward. If there was anyone Yi Chong would not wish to harm, it would definitely be the oldest of them, old Mr. Wang. Old Mr. Wang coughed softly. Young man, the boy did not know better, but I believe he's had his punishment. Perhaps you should let him go now, what do you say? Mew knew exactly what Yi Chong was thinking. That's enough, Yi, think of it as a lesson for him. Besides, you've eaten so much of their food without paying. Yi Chong inquired in his mind, Mew, does food require payment? Yi Chong did not have a single swan on him as all of his gold swan were left in his room on Black Cove. Mew was close enough to fainting after knowing his obliviousness. Heavens, Yi. Have you always been eating for free? Don't you know you have to pay for things? Yi Chong whispered, I only know that you have to pay to buy mechs. Besides, I don't think I've bought anything before. Yi Chong recalled his memories. Mew gave him a long lecture and finally made Yi Chong understand that the concept of bartering for goods. While the idea was not in line with Yi Chong's beliefs, he still agreed after much repetitive admonishment and advice. I've never seen the Iron Lizard giving anything in exchange for the Crimson Newts, Yi Chong muttered to himself. Of course, Mew completely ignored that thought of his. Old Mr. Wang was wise and incredibly clear-headed. Ziking was usually a steady man and would not act as rashly as today. Usually, situations like these were related to his beloved granddaughter. Old Mr. Wang looked at his granddaughter. As expected, Kyer looked panic-stricken. How could he not understand his own granddaughter? He immediately realized that his granddaughter must have had a bad encounter with the newcomer. Ziking wanted to do her a favor by making a fool of the guests to cheer her up. Sigh, it was so insensible of the two youngsters. Now look at the damage that has been done. It seemed that Yi Chong still treated him with some respect, and now old Mr. Wang had to step up and said a few words. This whole incident was definitely due to Kyer. Besides, he could not just stand aside and watch Ziking die before him. Yi Chong stood where he was in perfect silence. No one dared to break the silence for fear of awakening the demon. Sweat beaded on Vela's forehead, gradually soaking his hair and dripping onto the floor. He felt as though Yi Chong was always watching him with his cold glare. He was afraid to stare straight into the murderous stare from the silver eyes behind the black mask. He was very, very afraid that he would die in the next second. Vela felt like a fish trapped in a net, unable to move. There was pin-drop silence. The bizarre atmosphere filled the dining hall, creating an immense pressure on everyone present. Abruptly, Yi Chong spoke. "Since you have fed me earlier, I'll let it go this time. If there is a next time, do not hope for mercy." His final intonation added a chilling effect to the entire dining hall. After giving his thought, Yi Chong went straight for the dining table and sat down. Everyone breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Vela panted desperately and his body was thoroughly soaked with sweat. He had never felt so tired before. Vela strenuously placed his gun back into the holster. At the dining table, everyone went mute. They ate in silence. No one was brave enough to sit within 3 meters away from Yi Chong. Even Vela hid far away in a corner. Wang Weiqi and Wan Ziking returned to their rooms to rest and to recover from their shock. Moreover, Wan Ziking had sustained major injuries. The oppressive atmosphere continued on at the dining table. Yi Chong did not notice anything else but only focused on eating. Compared to the monotonous food on the trash planet, the delicacies here were enough to make him forget about everything else. Old Mr. Wang grinned. "Young man, where would you like to land?" Everyone perked up their ears at that moment. Most of the passengers on the starship were medical volunteers and they were dearly appreciated. Hence, Yi Chong's callous nature made them loathe him very much. However, upon realizing that Yi Chong could kill for something as petty as that trick, they quickly hid their thoughts and continued eating in silence. Yi Chong gobbled his food without stopping and spoke with a full mouth. "Where are you heading?" Old Mr. Wang kept his smile on and answered, "We're heading towards Blue Ocean. If you're leaving before that, we can fly you to your destination." Everyone gave a surprised look at old Mr. Wang and immediately returned to their meal. Unfortunately, Yi Chong was too focused on his meal that he did not notice their odd behavior. He replied carelessly, "Oh, then I'll head to Blue Ocean." Almost everyone gave a positive reaction to that. They arrived at Blue Ocean Planet. Yi Chong walked on the streets with his mask taken off. Without exposure to a star's rays in the recent past, Yi Chong's face seemed to be fairer than usual. Yi Chong could not bear to give up his windbreaker, for it was of good quality and definitely comparable to the high-grade protective clothing. His black windbreaker, fair skin, balanced and trimmed body with his cool expression all gave Yi Chong a very distinctive look, and that drew attention of many beautiful ladies on the street. Yi Chong walked expressionlessly on the streets, but on the inside, he was actually having a heated discussion with Mew. Yi Chong was amazed by the soaring skyscrapers, modern architecture, and flying vehicles of all sorts traversing through the skies. The most novel feature for Yi Chong was the number of people around. Whether it was on the trash planet or on Reno or Black Cove, Yi Chong had never seen so many people in his life. However, that was not what Yi Chong and Mew were immensely discussing about. "Mew, I'm so hungry. There are no mutants around here, and how can you call a small creature like that a mouse? What a disgrace to its species. It's not even as a starter. If the people of Trash Planet knew something like that was their own kin, they would probably wipe out these petty creatures." Yi Chong was incensed. Mew felt helpless. "Yi, I can't do much to help you. Why didn't you carry Gold Swan at all times? All that Gold Swan would have been able to feed you well for years." Yi Chong looked at his naked hands. All the expert-level mechs were left in his room. The asteroid belt was hazardous, and Yi Chong had left all the dimension keystones in his room since they interfered with his hand movements. If only he had one now, it would at least be enough to last him for a while. Sigh, why did I leave them all in my room? Yi Chong regretted. Mew was also dejected. It won't be for long until all my energy drains out too. Yi Chong thought, with my level of expertise, it's probably not a problem to do some mech maintenance and modification work, right? Mew was encouraged. That's not a bad idea. With me by your side, there should not be a problem. The mech was already looking forward to the good times ahead with eyes shining in anticipation. But, where are the mech repair shops? Yi Chong's practicality dragged Mew back from his fantasies. Mew muttered, that is a good question. You can always ask someone around. Ask someone. Yi Chong replied in agreement, that's a good idea. After Yi Chong's blank expression frightened off 5 passersby, even the usually insensitive Yi Chong felt discouraged. Do I really look that scary? Your ugly look is not your fault, but scaring people with your ugly look is. Mew decided to ignore Yi Chong's furious glare at him. An old man was walking slowly ahead of them. Yi Chong grew enthusiastic and ran to greet the old man with a smile. Grandpa, may I ask you about something? If the few passersby from before saw Yi Chong as he was now, they would surely be quite surprised. Mew was already used to his demeanor. Yi Chong seemed to have an uncanny affinity for older people, as well as a special connection with them. He would be inexplicably polite to the elderly, which is his usually indifferent expression shifting to a modest smile. Mew was also very surprised when he first observed the change in Yi Chong. The mech eventually got used to it. The old man glanced with interest at Yi Chong. There are not too many polite young people nowadays. You've got a question? Certainly, what would you like to know about? Polite. Mew could not help but rolled his eyes. Yi Chong resisted the urge to bash Mew in the head and continued modestly, Grandpa, I'd like to ask if there are places that offer mech maintenance and modification services nearby. Mech maintenance and modification. The old man thought for a moment, and pointed towards a street on the left. Head in that direction and in about 2 minutes, there'll be one and a few more further down the road, but you'll have to search for them carefully. After bidding farewell to the old man, Yi Chong proceeded towards the suggested location in haste. Yi Chong left a few repair shops without any offers. The shopkeepers that laid their eyes on Yi Chong noticed his age and shook their heads with the same thought, a modification mechanic as young as this. Don't joke around. For his age, remembering the names of all the parts in a mech is already commendable. Looking for a job? No, we're not hiring anyone. Yi Chong could not remember the number of times he was rejected. He may look expressionless on the outside, but he was very much disappointed on the inside. Mew was also dispirited, had downcast eyes and felt too tired for words. Yi Chong did not know where he was, but no matter the location, Yi Chong felt that it did not make a difference. Say Mew, why should we abide by the rules? Are we to starve to death? I've never heard of the iron lizard trading when it is hunting. Yi Chong could not help but complain to Mew. That's the behavior of beasts. You're a human, not a beast. Mew explained tiredly. It doesn't matter, I don't think there's any difference between humans and beasts. I think I'm more accustomed to the way of beasts. Yi Chong shrugged disapprovingly. He did not really understand Mew's insistence in this, but he still wished to give his utmost support. Mew was silent for a moment before speaking again, and this time in a serious tone. Yi, you're in a new society now. You abide by their rules or you will be rejected by them. Do you want to return to Trash Planet? Yi, you'll get used to it. Just give yourself some time to adapt to this new lifestyle. Yi Chong was a little moved by those words and pondered on them without noticing where he was heading to. Suddenly, there came a few garbled voices from in front of him and an old man's horrible cry. Yi Chong was brought out of his musings and lifted his eyes to look ahead. Was that not the old grandpa who showed him the way earlier? He now lay down on the ground where a few weird-looking teenagers were constantly kicking at him. One of them shouted domineeringly, FCK, I asked for money and you dared to say no until I had to lay my hands on you. You old prune. Now you know the consequences. The same young man made a signal at a blonde-haired teenager, and he immediately bent over to search the old man. The elderly curled himself into a ball, determinedly shielding his chest. The other boy could not pry open the old man's hands and shouted in anger, You dead ol' SHT. FCK want your money and not your life, isn't it so? Then I'll give you a hand. He pulled out a dagger and made a stab right into the old man. Yi Chong was furious. Anger burned within his chest until he could not bear it much longer, and with a yell, he walked towards their direction quickly and got in between the young hooligans. Yi Chong was fast and the hooligans could only notice a shadow before they felt hands tightening their throats. Their vision went black and became unconscious. Yi Chong moved incredibly fast such that the sound of rupturing throats of the hooligans were almost simultaneous. Fortunately, that area was secluded and only a few passersby witnessed the scene. All of them watched in fear and picked up their pace, wishing to get as far away from the scene as possible. Mew was still indulged in the excitement. So that's what it's like to give a helping hand to someone in need. His intent of killing the teenagers revoked after releasing his anger. Mew had a thought. Let's get the old man out of here now. If the intel from the virtual net was accurate, the police will hear in a few minutes. They seem to be difficult to deal with. Police. Difficult to deal with? Yi Chong asked, but Mew hurried him. Quick, now, or hide somewhere close so we can see what the police look like. The idea immediately won Yi Chong's approval. Yi Chong lifted the old man and found that he was in a semi-conscious state. The old man's face was bruised all over with a few bruises, looking very pitiful. With all concern, Yi Chong asked, "Is he alright?" Mew replied, "He's alright. Just slightly concussed and the wounds are only superficial. It's nothing serious." Yi Chong was relieved at that, and ran to far a corner, climbed and perched on a large tree. He spied from between the leaves where the hooligans were lying on the ground. As expected, after a few moments, a blue, white and black flying vehicle flew to the scene. From the vehicle, 3 men in uniform emerged. Yi Chong watched them curiously as they inspected each body carefully. On the other hand, Mew was quickly recording all the information he could get and updating the intel he obtained from the virtual net. Yi Chong suddenly thought of something and felt a great regret. "Mew, we forgot to search the bodies for spoils. They might have sworn on them." Mew consoled Yi Chong. "If they did, I don't think they would have a lot. Otherwise, why would they be robbing off people?" Yi Chong thought that was reasonable and he was no longer upset. The 3 police officers inspected the bodies in a proficient manner and felt a deep chill from their findings. The victims had their eyes wide open as though unable to believe that they were already dead. Their soft throats were obviously marked with a gaping hole. The youngest of the officers spoke, "Brother Fei, these people all suffered from crushed vertebrae at their necks. They died just recently." Another middle-aged officer added, "Brother Fei, I know these people. They're lackeys for the local ringleader, Lang San, and were usually quite rampant." The one they called Brother Fei noticed finger impressions around the gaping holes. They died from their throats being squeezed with someone's bare hands. The other 2 were astonished. "Brother Fei, someone's bare hands? Surely you're exaggerating." Brother Fei lit a cigar and leisurely exhaled a puff smoke. The smoke swirled around in the air as he muttered to himself, "I hope that the ruthless bastard was only passing by." If not, after a long pause, he suddenly spoke to the middle-aged officer, "Shin, report this to Lang San. I'm warning that he better take control of himself. If he dares to make a fuss over this, he better watch out for the consequences." His expression beyond the smoke was unreadable as the middle-aged officer acknowledged his orders. Brother Fei spoke to the other younger officer, "Zai, check out if there are any unfamiliar faces in the area or any suspicious people. Remember, do not take any action without my orders. Don't let him know that we're on to him." The young and excited Zai replied, "I'll remember it, Brother Fei. Don't worry. I'll find out about the bastard." The smoke from the cigar swirled in unpredictable patterns before Brother Fei's eyes. The police officer seemed to be certain that this was just the beginning of a serious case. I mean, the black coat is a cool idea, but it's not cool especially after you got flour all over it. Hey you can't get customers with that long face you put on? It scares them away." "Ugh, what do you think you are doing with the chopping board?" "No, you are disassembling it. Gosh. Could you spare our chairs some mercy? We need those to work." "Aw man." This hectic scenario had reoccurred a few times, yet Grandpa Qian had hardly blamed Yi Chong. Instead he smiled and continuously encouraged him to keep the young man going. Practice certainly makes perfect. As time went by, Yi Chong's noodle-making skills dramatically improved. The texture of the noodles got better and better. He was able to utilize his fearsome strength constructively to create the most springy noodle in a place that had earned compliments from almost every customer that came to the shop. In addition, Grandpa Qian's smile and constant motivation were eventually able to melt the ice between him and Yi Chong as the indifference in his expression faded away. He had changed so much that he would sometimes take the initiative to head out and get more customers. On some occasions, the elderly would take Yi Chong along for a shopping day, as he would also introduce some of his old friends to the boy. Their relationship progressed as they had grown fond of each other. It somehow became a habit later to have the boy by his side whenever he was heading out. Yi Chong had gotten used to such a lovely life. There was no stress. He didn't have to stay outrageously alert at all times and found the long-lost comfort in it. His life might be mundane, but he was happy with it. However, Yi Chong's training was not put on hold because of living in tranquility. Ever since the breakthrough he had made in his marble training back at Black Cove, controlling more than 10 marbles at once was no more of an issue for him. In fact, he picked up fairly quickly after that. Surprisingly, he had managed to control up to 13 marbles by then. His daily fitness training was carried on vigorously under Mu's guidance. It was as if he was born for such style of training. His strength rose sharply, yet his muscle remained the same size ever. And this would be the whole point. The increase in strength would ought to lead to an increase in muscle size. It is unavoidable for any ordinary person. Thus, when muscle strength reaches saturation point, the body muscle would be at its largest too. This would radically reduce the overall movement and agility of your body in the long run. Hence, it became an issue on how one should boost one's strength without influencing one's body size. Vitality might be one source of velocity, it still doesn't necessarily mean that one would possess velocity after obtaining vitality. This could be clearly justified by the dexterity problem a bulkier body would cause. To remedy such issue, the group in Black Cove committed the use of silver liquid as a form of simulation to inhibit muscle growth at last, while combining the ancient martial arts. It might be an ongoing issue for anyone who sought both strength and speed, but it was non-existent to Yi Chong himself. The reason being, no matter how hard he had trained and how much his strength had improved, his body would always remain the way it was from the beginning. Hence, Mu, intrigued as he was, mapped out a gruesome or even forbidding training course for this boy with such a unique talent. While Yi Chong was taking his brutal training like a man, Mu seemed stuck in the virtual world, for whatever unspoken reason it was. He was rather mysterious of his whereabout. It was quite fortunate for Yi Chong that his noodle business got better and better. Imagine the vast expenditure that mainly revolved around Mu's resupply of energy monthly without any form of proper income. To top that off, it also costs another fortune to fill Yi Chong's bottomless appetite. He might have to put up the shutters and be in debt anytime soon if his noodles were not selling like hotcakes. Though the days lapsed in hustles and bustles, Yi Chong was feeling absolutely content. On the other hand, the punks appeared to have run for their lives after Yi Chong demonstrated his terrifying force. They seemed to have disbanded the gang, like animals in a forest fire. No one since then had ever dared threat to lay claim the gang's monthly protection fee from the poor residents, which was quite costly too. Sun Xulin and Shou, her cousin, were rotting at home. The parents were out. But what about food? Both of them had barely any experience in cooking their own meals before. They were both troubled. Shoei, why don't we have some noodles at Grandpa Qian's shop? His noodles aren't bad, you know, suggested Xulin. Noodles. Shou frowned and seemed to not like the idea. Are you sure? But we don't seem to have other choice. They went to Grandpa Qian's shop. Welcome. Right after they stepped into the shop, Grandpa Qian greeted them as he chuckled. Xulin, my girl, it's been a while since you had my noodles here. What made you come here today out of a sudden? Ha ha ha, she laughed along. Oh well, it can't be helped. My parents are not at home today. We could only come here instead. Oh, by the way, she dragged Shou to the front of him. This is my sister, Shou. I usually call her Shoei. Such a posh lady. Xulin, I guess she can't be your sister, can she? With such posh making a striking contrast to your nature. Ha ha ha, alright, what would you like to have today? The usual course for my tough girl. What about you, my gentle lady? Shou was uncontrollably blushing as he complimented. Sun Xulin replied, yeah, the same for me. Shoei, what do you want to have? Sis, she whispered, I'll have the same as yours then. The elderly chuckled again. That would be 2 bowls of beef noodles, alright. 2 beef noodles for the ladies here. Grandpa Qian shouted towards the kitchen, and a voice that was not loud but clear came responding afterwards, got it. What? Xulin staggered a little. Grandpa, you got an assistant already. When was this? Why did I never know about this? He answered pleasingly, he's not an assistant. Yi is a distant relative of mine. Well, you know how an elderly like me would need a companion sometimes. Living alone was such a tough chore for me. So I called him here. Grandpa Qian had repeated these lines countless times to countless customers whenever Yi Chong was mentioned. Somehow at some point, he felt that he had been telling the truth all this while, as Yi Chong really felt like a part of his family. A moment later, Yi Chong exited the kitchen with 2 bowls of steaming beef noodles on the tray. Even though his expression still appeared a bit bland, people could see the fickle joy on his face sometimes. He walked to the table of the ladies, laid his noodles in front of them, enjoy, and dashed back to the kitchen after that. Xulin had a taste and was as amazed as before. Wow. This is still very great. She praised on, Grandpa, these noodles were better than the one you made. The texture was too good. Grandpa Chien looked proud as he responded, "It certainly is. Yi has standard in his cooking. Anyone would have complimented too after tasting his dishes." He smiled broadly, as if he's the one being praised. The amazement continued as Xulin saw the extremely thin slices of beef on top the noodles. "This is very good treatment. The slicing skill is impeccable." Oh, how joyful the old man was. He smiled with eyes narrowing into a slit. "Yi, my boy. You heard that. The customer praised your skills." "Oh, why thank you." Yi Chong replied and shook his head. Grandpa was always such a messenger. He just has to reiterate the compliments to me right after the customer. Man, wouldn't he get fed up of this? Yi Chong thought so, yet he smiled for a brief moment. The corners of his lips somehow raised themselves. He sniggered as he proceeded with rolling the dough before him. As he rolled on, he spoke in his mind, "Mew, what are you doing?" It took a while for Mew to come up with a reply. "I am currently engaged in something right now. Just keep the dough rolling." His voice trailed off. He seemed to have vanished right after his reply. Yi Chong wondered what Mew had been doing in the virtual world these days. He thought maybe he should get online again someday. It's been a while since his last NRS training. I wonder if those elders at Aurora were doing great all these while. He kneaded the dough energetically. Glancing at the report in his hand, he lighted a cigar. The smoke of confusion wafted through the atmosphere as Brother Fei tried to figure out the situation. According to the outcome of Z's latest scouting, only Grandpa Qian's shop had a newcomer, and everyone who had eaten at his place informed that the newcomer happened to be his distant relative of his who pleaded him for a living and also happened to have great cooking skills. Hopefully he wasn't the culprit of my men's death, or else. He breathed heavy as he worried. His room was veiled by the smoke of his ponders. Things could hardly be seen. Lang San stood upright in silence as his eyes wavered upon the corpses before him. The menacing face of his had not much of an expression, other than the growing grimness in his eyes. He tried to hold his eyes, but he couldn't hold it in any longer, when his sight landed upon the corpse in the middle. The stern face of his shattered. His cheeks were trembling as misery took over his face. He couldn't hide it. He stared at this particular corpse. Tears overflowed his eyes and they streamed silently down his face, landing on the floor like an atomic bomb to his heart. The corpse was his brother, his own brother. He had been trying his best to keep the identity of his brother in secret all along, for he wouldn't want his brother to be affected, as he was well aware that he could be dead anytime, anywhere in the future, since he had created too many enemies over the course of time. So his brother was disguised as a simple underling of the gang. Unquestionably it was a successful disguise, and his brother had remained unharmed all these years. But then, the corpse placed in front of him being actually his brother, he could not believe every part of this, especially when his brother was killed by having his throat crushed with bare hands. How could this not be heartbreaking to Lang San? How could this not be depressing enough to shatter his soul? It was rare to have men with such immense strength in this place. There's no way he could not find this man out. If he ever found that man, he's going to break all his bones and grind him into dust. He would make sure that man would be in torment forever. Lang San gravely promised, gritting his teeth. Did something happen to our leader? The few remaining men of his were worried. Shush. The door opened and Lang San came out with a pair of reddened eyes. His voice was coarse as he mumbled, "Go. Go and find that man." Yi Chong started his day early in the morning. Well, since Grandpa Chien was very much old and he was no longer in good shape too, Yi Chong believed he should be working harder to keep the business running. The sun gradually shone through the open shutter of the noodle shop. Yi Chong peeked out of the entrance. The street at daybreak was still very much deserted. There were a few pedestrians at most. Yi Chong's finger swiped the switch on the wall, turning on the air purifier, which started rumbling a little upon activation. Clouds of ionized water droplets were then being ejected from the machine, creating refreshing air to breathe. A moment later, the interior of the shop became cozier. Such an efficient air purifier was not cheap to begin with, but it was purchased by Grandpa Chien using part of the year-end bonus he received from the government, just to improve the environment of his shop. The floor of the shop might have been made out of nanomaterials and was indeed dust-proof, but daily cleaning was still required to provide customers an enjoyable environment while dining in. The interior of the shop was furnished with 8 metallic buddings, which would bloom like an actual flower upon touching the tip of it. Inside, there would be 4 sets of table and chairs with 1 set at each petal. The chairs were connected beneath through the frames right to the center platform of the budding. The silvery glossy platform in the middle was size adjustable, and there lay the cashier connected to the processor in the customer's table. so they could proceed with the checkouts directly even when they are still seated after their meals. At the corner of the shop there was also an automated noodle maker, which was seldom used considering how the shop's reputation relied solely on handmade noodles. There was simply something in handmade noodles that machine-made noodles could never compete with. Previously, Grandpa Chien actually wanted a more of an old-fashioned design for his shop, like a wooden construction for example, but woods were absurdly pricey, so he threw out that plan at last. While Yi Chong was sweeping the floor, Grandpa Chien seemed to have woken up too, as he walked in and began some other cleaning tasks as well. Soon after they had done their cleaning, a middle-aged man set foot into the shop with a cigar in his mouth. "Fei," Grandpa Chien halted. "Fei, my boy, is that you? Why the early visit today, eh?" The man addressed as Fei replied, "Good morning, Uncle Chien. Well, I have some things to do today, so I came early." Fei seemed to be a frequent visitor here. As he picked a seat by the wall, "I'll take my usual place." Grandpa Chien was welcoming at first, till his sight fell upon the cigar in his mouth. "Fei, how many times have I told you? Do you know how harmful smoking these early in the morning is? Why won't you stop doing this? When will you ever learn from my advice and not your fatal mistake?" Fei was alerted. He hurriedly removed the cigar in his mouth and attempted to act funny to let it slide. "I forgot about it. Ha 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 ha, I'm so forgetful, am I not? So what would our boy want to have today?" Grandpa Chien asked. "I'll have some plain noodles today, thanks Uncle Chien. Your noodles are sure something here, you know. It's been quite a while since I came and I was missing your delicious noodles so much that I drooled," he answered laughingly. Grandpa Chien tittered joyfully, "Though I'm getting old and I can't knead the dough as good as before, but luckily I still have you to make the noodles for me and he is so much better." He said it proudly and ordered on top of his lungs, Yi, get a bowl of plain noodles for this boy here." "Okay." Yi Chong responded flatly. "You have a new guy here, Uncle Chien?" Fei asked in bewilderment. "Nah, he's just a distant relative of mine. I was feeling a bit lonely, you know, old man problems. So I brought him here." Out of curiosity Fei asked on, "Where does he come from then?" Grandpa Chien flinched. Somewhere far, far away," muttered he. Ha. Fei tried to lighten the atmosphere. "Sigh, the silly habit of my job again. Please don't mind me, Uncle Chien." "Grandpa." Yi Chong's voice rang from the inside, "We are out of corianders." Grandpa Chien gasped and tapped his head. "How could I forget this? Sigh, we can't be out of corianders. We need this," mumbled the elderly. He then shouted towards the kitchen again, "Yi, I'm heading out to get some corianders now. Don't forget to serve our customer, okay?" Yi Chong okayed and the elderly waddled out of the shop after that. Yi Chong then served Fei a bowl of plain noodles a moment later. Placing it on the round table, he concisely greeted the customer, "Enjoy." As he turned and walked away, Fei called him, "Hey brother, your name, Yi, was it?" Yi somehow felt discomfort seeing the man before him. There was not only discomfort but also a little bit of familiarity. He carried on with a concise response, "Yes." And he tried to walk away again. "So, you are the one who killed those men that day?" Fei lighted his cigar again. He spoke unrelaxingly, "Aren't you?" Yi Chong's eyes rapidly turned cold. He could sense danger behind the line as he finally realized that the very man before him was one of the police officers he spotted that day. "That's why I'm feeling this much of hazard." Yi Chong didn't know many ways to resolve a risky situation like this. Strangling was the only one he knew and used the most. Without much hesitation, his instinct ordered him to conduct the method immediately. His body waved to the front and his right hand reached Fei's throat with lightning speed. The airwaves created as he propelled broke through the veil of smoke surrounding Fei. I was right after all. As he saw the changes in Yi Chong's expression, Fei's speculation was justified. He didn't come unprepared of course, but Yi Chong's speed was something not included in his plan. As a result he was barely able to block Yi Chong's attack with his arm. Fei. Yi Chong clenched his right hand and launched it at Fei's blocking arm. A crippling blow, followed by the sounds of crushed bones and a groan after. Fei's face turned pale as Yi Chong's fist literally just smashed his arm. The broken bone pieces gashed out of his ruptured muscle. Fei had cold sweat over his trembling body while his right hand was permanently disabled. The attack wasn't ending anytime soon as Yi Chong raised his fist again while Fei was frozen with helpless vulnerability. Fei's soon-to-be last words were, "Uncle Chien. Hey there." It actually worked. Yi Chong stumbled and held his punch. Right at that moment, Fei quickly backed away from Yi Chong and leaned against the wall, wheezing. Yi Chong took a look to his rear. Grandpa Chien wasn't there. He hadn't returned. Liar. His sight lay on Fei once more, with a frigid glare. If you, Fei, catching his breath as he was trying to word something, if you killed me, you are not helping Uncle Qian. A hint of hesitation flashed in Yi Chong's eyes. If you killed me, the police, they will be here anytime. You could run, you could hide, of course the police can't get you, but they can get Uncle Qian, don't forget that. The first time he discovered his signature skill did not work out the way he wanted, he was already enraged. The bloodthirsty soul burned up high, yet the sane soul told him to not kill the man in front, as the man was right in his words. And Mew emerged in his thoughts from out of the blue. Yi, this is blatant threatening, but it works most of the time. Of course it worked. That's why Yi Chong was very much angered. The person clearly was alarming to his sense of security, but he could not neutralize the threat at all. Cowardliness and helplessness were teasing him. His agitation built up over time. Yi, Mew seemed to have sensed his emotion. Don't panic. There's still a way. Of what kind? Yi Chong spoke in his mind. Mew sneered, hey, and spoke on ominously. In your language, that would be, smack the heck out of him, but don't kill him just yet. The advice was joyful to hear. He knew Mew wouldn't let him down as he pounced on Fei and literally smacked the heck out of Fei. Wait, this shouldn't be it. Fei wasn't expecting resistance. Is he really a cold-blooded person? That he would not care about that old man at all. Did my info fail me? The next scene was Yi Chong precisely landing a kick at Fei's stomach with the tip of his foot. Well, Mew did mention about keeping him half dead and not utterly dead. So Yi Chong's kick this time was only 30% of his usual force, yet Fei was rolling on the floor in pain. Yi Chong did not concern what the person would become after the violence, as long as he would stay alive. He punched and kicked as every blow counted, just to unleash the annoyance this punching bag gave him all this while. Poor Fei was getting distorted, being hit to the ground. He would rather die. Or faint on the spot. But Yi wasn't aiming for the critical spot of his body to knock him out. Plus he was obviously holding back his strength at the perfect amount to make sure he stayed conscious while tasting every bit of the ache he received. His mentality warded himself from getting crazy over this everlasting torment. Still, deep inside he regretted the presumptuous inspection this time so much. What a stupid mistake I made. Now, choke his neck, but don't suffocate him to death. Another happy-go-lucky suggestion from Mew, as his tone went like the little devil brandishing the fork by Yi Chong's ears. Yi Chong, without a doubt, did as he was told to. Okay, tell him that there's 52 policemen at his station. Make sure it sounds like a threat. It's a courtesy to return one's greeting. His devil wings excitingly fluttered. Threat. How should I word it like a threat? That was not an issue for Yi Chong, as it was an inborn ability within himself. The lines did not need much polishing, and they came out uttering from his lips like a cold winter storm. The atmosphere was feeling tense as Fei shivered to what he heard, which felt like a blade against his neck. So I heard, you have 52 men back at your office? He spoke bluntly. 52, huh? And that was the last straw to Fei's calmness. Oh, and you do have a lovely wife and daughter, don't you? Who happily stayed at Guanghua Garden N14-328-24. He carried on his performance. Your wife has such a good name, Hian, named after the swallow, while your daughter is named after the tiny bloom of flower, Meng Ruier, who happens to be 7 years old this year, am I right? Mr. Meng. The rolling information that came struck like a thunder on Fei, shattering his last bit of sanity as he wriggled and screamed, Who are you? I warn you. Don't you ever dare to lay a finger on them. Or else, I'll make sure I'll destroy you. Good. Kekek, now he has learned his lesson. One last warning to make sure he does not simply threat an ordinary citizen like us, then you can let him go. The little devil signaled mercy on generosity. You better be not planning to do anything funny, or else, hey, I'll be the one. Fei could only laugh along bitterly, knowing his doom was destined. However, Yi Chong gestured to let him free. Upon knowing such good news, Fei did not want to wait any longer. He struggled his way out. Hold it. Fei flinched. Money. Pay for your food first. Pointing at the cold noodles on the table, Yi Chong nonchalantly demanded. Beep. Thank you, and come again. Fei wobbled out of the shop. So where did you learn this trick? Yi Chong asked Mew. Hey, Mew laughed. I watched some movies recently. This happens to be the typical scene. Then how did you even know the number of policemen at his station? And his home, too? That's simple. Of course I sneaked into the station and hacked his profile out, duh. Everything is written on it. So this is what they called threatening. Why would it be more practical than killing him on spot? The iron lizard didn't seem to have used this trick before. Yi Chong collected his mind, yet he was still in much bewilderment. Well, he's merely human, that's why. Mew reminded. Yi Chong finally summoned Mew back from the alternate dimension. It had been quite some time ever since Mew went out of order. Though Grandpa Qian owned a rather spacious accommodation, it still seemed crammed with Mew's gigantic mechanical body inside. Yi Chong had to readjust Mew's posture in order to fit him in. He folded his legs and placed the body in quite an eyesore pose on the ground. Mew was partially lying on the floor, with his legs lifted in. What do you think you're doing? With his mouth rumbling. Grandpa Qian sighed in sympathy as he laid his sight upon the torn body of Mew. Such a fine mech he had, but became all broken by then. What a pity. Well, there wasn't any other helmet to connect to the virtual world other than the one in Mew's system. Yi Chong hopped into the cabin and put on the helmet, logging in, and there he went. The virtual world stayed the same. The same old street, the same old crowd, and the same old fields, a visit to his recent past. He knew where he would head to next. He glanced at the path and proceeded to Aurora to have a nice reunion. The elderlies at the Aurora pined for Yi Chong's revisit. Some of them were in bitter worries while waiting as they wondered if something had happened to their precious boy. It was their lucky day, they thought, as they were surprised by Yi Chong's return. A session of warm greetings happened between them, and Yi Chong's smile broadened like a shrinking violet. He bowed farewell to the benevolent elderlies and shifted to the NRS training field. Of course, Mew had long vanished from his thoughts by then. Wonder where Mew had gone to this time. The field was still vibrant as ever. The combat field was as entertaining as it used to be. Yi Chong was stirred up by the fighting sequences occurring in the field. He missed the hand-on experience. One round would do. Yi Chong got up. Yi, I had just completed the creation of your identification documents. Mew was good with timing, like too good. You have to get it now. It's much safer with it, gravely dangerous without it. Identification card. It's done. It would be indeed better with formal identification, considering how Bai Linen seemed to be wetting himself upon hearing how Yi Chong did not even own one back at Reno. Speaking of Bai Linen, what had happened to that guy? Yi Chong strolled the street alone. Several aircrafts and mechs zoomed by. They passed through the floating buildings in the anti-gravitational force field while flaunting some fancy tricks in their piloting. He was stimulated by the action. His desire to pilot was struck in a whim. As his finger slid to the keystone in his pocket and called up a F-58 in front, Yi Chong hopped in and impatiently launched the machinery. The F-58 blasted off into the air and glided mischievously. Yi Chong played off some tricks in between. The mech sometimes would slide right across the windows of the floating window, which put the owner in cold sweat. Yi. Mew started his commentary, this is bad. TSK, what happened to your performance? It's as if our training had gone to waste. That flip you made just now was not smooth enough. And also your timing for acceleration has an inaccuracy of 5.78%. Are you an amateur or you're from the dump? Oh wait, you are from a blue humanoid mech bolted by. And it just contemplated Yi Chong, waving its hand far ahead. TSK. Yi, look at you, look at how fallen you had become. Mew carried on adding fuel to the fire. Even a noob would come and pick on you in your face. Yi, please don't tell anybody that I was the one who planned the training course for you. I am embarrassed enough. Humphy. Yi Chong snorted and sped up as he chased after that easy peasy in front. That blue mech was obviously modified for speed enhancement. The appearance justified everything. Foldable wings, about 4 of them, would allow stability while traveling in the atmosphere, a sylph-like body and 6 additional wings smaller in size at the sides of the end. The modified mech looked like a giant bird spreading wings in the sky as it traveled, with its tiny body in the embrace of its large elaborated wings. A featherweight craft. Every addition on this mech was about speed. Thus, it was unquestionable that this mech was superior in its speed. But then, as Yi Chong looked through, this mech might as well be a piece of junk like those he saw back at his planet. It is a total failure. The mech did possess greater speed, but that's all it had. Everything else than its speed was disturbingly terrible. Featherweight. More like paperweight. It had such a thin body that Yi Chong wondered if it could even take the slightest touch and if the pilot would break before the mech. The elaborated wings were unnecessary in his opinion, and they were utterly useless once it set off into space. In an atmospheric zone, he would only need 2 wings at the side, with half the size of what this exaggerated hunk of metal had, and maintained 80% of the current performance. Smaller wings would also reduce the likelihood of being struck by enemies effectively. That was not it. The worst part of this crap is that this noob seemed to care about speed so much he forgot about the capacity. It was so limited that it could not even be loaded with anything else than the pilot himself. And what? It didn't even have its own weaponry. A mech without weaponry is only an escape pod with fancy wings. Yi Chong thought. But well, Mew was an exception to his rules. Even though the mech did have some odd style of modification, it still cruised like a breeze. F-58 is a mech for space travels. So it does not have any wings at the sides, thus the underwhelming performance during travel in the atmosphere. Fortunately, in exchange, it contains an advanced engine, and with Yi Chong's first-class obstacle piloting skills, the F-58 did not lose out badly. In fact, it had always been right behind that blue mech. It sounded cool. Still, it was just right behind. Close, yet not close enough. It was tricky to overtake that blue mech. Meanwhile, Mew was being extremely helpful at that moment. Aw man. Yi, did you know you could have made this turn 0.035 seconds faster? Hey Yi. Oh my, ugh, what had you even learned back at the NRS training? Oh wait, what do you even remember from the training? Did you forget everything else other than the fact that you lived? Did you know you are deplorably 4.5% below than the standard of performance I had set for you? The two mechs were flying in the city center. The floating houses were denser than the outskirts. There were more traveling crafts in the air too. It seemed that the blue mech right in front did not intend to be above the neighborhood. Instead, he weaved in and out around the buildings. Two of them raced on the road, one behind another, showing zero concern for traffic or any passerby. The center was chaotic. The pedestrians had their eyes hooked on the outrageous racers threading paths, and they tripped themselves while dodging the fast and furious. The traffic on its peak hour had been turned into a bummer, a splat of honking and craft collisions. In the meantime, Yi Chong never thought of the issue going off before him. Traffic chaos. You got to be kidding me. The sky is bloody boundless and bloody bright, and you tell me you can't fly anywhere you want. Technically, the concept of order in traffic had yet instilled in his mind during that time. He was all eyes focused on the blue mech in the front of him. Intense. Exciting. It's been a while I got this driven. Yi Chong's blood was boiling with adrenaline stimulating every inch of his nerves. His body and his mind were all onto the inputs. The sluggish sequence at first started to get more and more seamless over the course. Slowly he picked up the sense of traveling at full speed. He began performing overwhelming dodges as he traveled like a swordfish winding in the corals, freely and happily. Gradually the gap between Yi Chong and the opponent shortened. The opponent seemed to have felt the stress exerted by Yi Chong as his action became a bit disorderly. The outsiders might not discern the difference, but Yi Chong certainly did, every frame of it. He took the chance and shortened the distance even further. After the mistake the blue mech pilot made, he calmed himself down immediately. He would not be giving more opportunities to the F-58 behind. No more let-ups. As obvious the F-58 was inferior to his craft in terms of speed, Yi Chong managed to put up such a situation merely because of his ultimate piloting skills. Mew was bored by Yi Chong in all focus. What's the point of this race with zero expertise? If I want to watch something blindly speeding, I could watch mech commercials and not this. Mew, stop blabbering and help me take a look at the rear. There were some mechs behind. Yi Chong noticed something when he was occupied. He asked Mew to do the lookout for him. Mew did notice the mechs tailing from afar. There were 3 mechs in pure black, white and blue respectively, and a white mech leading with a speed almost as fast as the F-58. Oh, it seems like they are from the police force. Mew observed carefully. Well, I have no idea what that white one does though. Its specification wasn't as bad as your F-58, what? Mew was shocked out of sudden. Yi, careful, he turned serious, that white mech right behind you, it is fully armed. Yi Chong pondered a little. He had enough fun at the moment. Moreover, the white mech behind was sending chills down his spine. Time to end the race. A sharp turn by Yi Chong, right into the other street. It was unexpected for the blue mech pilot till he was dazed for a second and nearly hit the building in front. The body of his mech brushed through the metal edges of the building and its integrity was breached, as what Yi Chong had pointed out. This mech did have an issue. He barely made it out alive. He rolled out of the cabin and was found surrounded by a horde of police mechs. He was caught red-handed. Yi Chong's sudden change en route also stupefied the white mech behind. But he turned along without hesitation. Yi Chong's heart skipped a beat upon seeing the white mech appearing behind again. This guy. He was really after me. Oh Yi, how lovely. Mew added, this guy seems to have a thing for you, eh? Oh, be careful, his weaponry seems to be activating. Yeah, Mew totally was joking. Not. Traveling at maximum speed, Yi Chong took a lightning glance at the white mech projected in his interface. It seemed that the white mech had opened up its hidden artillery from within. The hostility was blatant. With another sharp turn, he made right into extended street at the side. The white mech was unprepared for this and was left dazed again, but he made it up fairly quickly and chased on. The other crafts in the street were astounded by Yi Chong's intrusion as they ran for their lives, steering clear of him. The place was in disarray. The panicked mech flocks blocked the white mech's way. He glared at Yi Chong, getting out of sight in a few blinks. Finally, Yi Chong let out a sigh of relief. He slowed down, took a breath and moved on in relaxation. Well, the race before had consumed massive amounts of energy. He had to slow down or he would be walking a gazillion miles home. Yi. Mew's voice rang again, look at the sky. Yi Chong lifted the camera upon the sky. In horror he looked at the projection. The white mech was lurking in the sky, aiming the muzzle of his laser rifle at Yi Chong. Like and subscribe.